A powerful and dangerous tropical cyclone is developing rapidly in the Coral Sea and is expected to belt Queensland later next week with a significant landfall. We've got a significant tropical cyclone in the making for this January 20th forecast update brought to you by Force 13 Australia. And we're looking at it right now on the satellite imagery. You can see a good bunch of convection blowing up over the Coral Sea right now. That's that precursor to the tropical cyclone that's going to form either later today or early tomorrow, where we could be seeing the next name on the Australian naming list, Cyclone Kirrily, utilised on this system. If you are brand new here and want further coverage on this storm, please do consider subscribing. And while you're at it, might as well leave a like on the video as well. And I thank you for doing so in advance. But taking a look at the national picture right now, you can see hot conditions remain over the nation's west. You can see some daytime maxima today around Paraburdoo expected to exceed 50 degrees in one or two spots, maybe into 51 degrees for a town called Lyndon. We've also got rain and storms for northern Australia associated with tropical low 03U, which is going to move into Western Australia early next week. Still some rain for the Cape York Peninsula and storms extending down into southeast and central Queensland. We've got showers for the northeastern quadrant of Hobart and also still showers over New Zealand, where over 200 millimetres of rain has fallen in some places, and hot conditions extend for the eastern coast of the South Island, including places like Dunedin and Christchurch. Now for the tropical cyclone forecast graphic, you can see that 90% chance of development in the Coral Sea. It's going to happen, it's just a matter of when it happens now, and it's probably going to become a tropical cyclone in the next 24 to 36 hours. And we've still got tropical cyclone Angret kicking in the southwest Indian Ocean at this time. I believe it's still at Category 1 status, but I'll be honest with you, I haven't put any looks or times into that cyclone because it really is just wobbling around in the middle of the ocean, and it's no threat to land whatsoever at this point. However, it could come relatively close to the Cocos-Keeling Islands, which is a needle in the haystack in the Indian Ocean, over the coming couple of days. Now for our tropical cyclone forecast graphic for tropical low 90p or 05U, you can see 60 km/h winds, pressure of 997 millibars. This forecast is very conservative. The peak wind speeds on most models call for this cyclone to become a Category 5 at some point in its lifetime. But because of the amount of uncertainty, I'm not going to call anything yet. When this gets upgraded to a tropical cyclone and we get a lot more information publicly available on this system, then that's when I'm going to be making calls such as that. So make sure you're sticking around to the channel because there is so much uncertainty with this system right now, and it's a pretty even split between models taking it over land and taking it just brushing past land and out to sea. Now you can see as the storm gears up for landfall next Tuesday and Wednesday, it rapidly intensifies, becomes that very strong, powerful tropical cyclone, making landfall just southwest of town or southeast of Townsville as a Category 5 strength tropical cyclone on the Australian scale before it moves inland and parallels the Queensland coastline, re-emerging offshore as a tropical cyclone around Hervey Bay and bringing what looks to be Category 2 strength cyclone conditions to Brisbane and the Gold Coast, or at least those coastal regions there, which could be the first cyclone to impact that region in quite some time. Now for the G3 rainfall forecast nationwide, you can see a lot of rainfall still expected to fall across the Northern Territory and Western Australia. They've already had over a week's worth of just persistent rainfall, so a lot more rainfall there will obviously equal major flooding in some places, especially across the northern parts of Western Australia. And then you can see we're going to get this flooding situation develop next Thursday and Friday across parts of central Queensland associated with what will be at that point Tropical Cyclone Kirrily. Australia Day could be a very wet day for southeastern Queensland, so expect hampered celebrations. You might have to spend the day inside because it is going to be a very wet, and in locations that will be affected by the cyclone, a cyclonic Australia Day. So not looking like a very good forecast there. Now, I did mention those 50-degree maximas today across parts of Western Australia. Well, around Paraburdoo and Roebourne, there will be places that tickle 50 to 51 degrees Celsius today. It could be the hottest day of the year for some locations, so very hot weather expected indeed. But again, it's the Australian summer, so anything over 45 you can basically expect for some locations across our red centre. There'll be one or two cold spots associated with the passing of those that tropical low in Western Australia in about a week's time, and you can also see one or two cold spots in the wake of what will be at that point Tropical Cyclone Kirrily across parts of central Queensland, where we could be seeing daytime maxima drop as low as 20 degrees in some tropical zones, so very cool indeed. Now for a look at the satellite imagery, you can see those two tropical lows swirling around over different parts of the Australian region. One of them is over the Northern Territory, still firing some impressive convection aided by the brown ocean effect, and you can see that main one in the Coral Sea. That's the dangerous one that we're watching. That's firing up a lot of cloud convection just south of the Solomon Islands, and it is going to be tracking towards Australia over the next 6 days. Let's take a look at the forecast models and see what's in store for the nation over the next 10 days. So we're taking a look at the IR satellite imagery right now. This gives us an idea of how strong the thunderstorms are, and the convection is around the storm center, which thus gives us a pretty good idea of how the storm is developing and how strong the cyclone is right now. Now you can see a lot of very deep thunderstorm convection with cloud tops reaching about minus 90 degrees Celsius in one or two spots. That means that we've got some very intense thunderstorms around the center of the storm, and as you can see with the whites and the blacks, that this cyclone, or this developing tropical cyclone, has some very intense thunderstorms around its center, which means that it can and probably will rapidly develop over the next 2 to 3 days as it moves into the Coral Sea. So looking very decent on this band of satellite imagery. And if we switch it over to the visible satellite imagery, you can also see a lot of these low-level clouds here streaming around into the center of the cyclone, which means that it's a rotating system. It's got a defined and closed low-level center of circulation, which also means that it is developing very nicely, and it will probably be upgraded into a tropical cyclone very shortly by the Bureau of Meteorology, maybe in a day or 36 hours or so. But we'll be watching it very closely, and you can expect updates on the Force 13 AU channel when this gets upgraded into a tropical cyclone. So make sure you are subscribed because you don't want to be missing those forecasts. Now we're going to switch it over to the wind and take a look at said forecast for this tropical cyclone as I spoil what the Eastern Relief has in store. We've now got all three major forecast models, the Eastern Relief, the GFS, and the Access G3 model, calling for a direct landfall somewhere between Cardwell and Rockhampton. So the landfall location is getting a little bit more honed in at this time, which is good because yesterday I said there's a lot of uncertainty. I didn't expect there to be much more certainty today, but we've actually gotten a much clearer picture of what this storm's expected to do. So I'm going to be able to give you a more detailed forecast. But if we start taking a look at the models right now and playing this through, you can see it gets its cyclone force winds and these gales wrapping around the center by around Sunday morning. So tomorrow morning, you're going to be seeing these gale force winds wrapping around the center, which means that it will likely be upgraded into a fully fledged tropical cyclone, picking up the name of Kirrily. And then as we continue to play this through, you can see it strengthens quite rapidly throughout Monday and into Tuesday actually, and you can see by Tuesday morning we're looking at a category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone. Now if you remember the graphic that I showed you at the start of the video, I called for this storm to peak as a category 3 strength tropical cyclone. Now I'm not confident that the cyclone will peak as a category 3. I'm betting that it will peak quite significantly stronger than that. However, we're just really unsure of where this cyclone is going to go and what intensity it will get to, because we don't have a really good idea of what the steering currents are going to be in the area right now. There's going to be a high pressure system down towards the south here in the Tasman Sea. You can already see it down here south of Victoria, and that's going to be the major driving factor in how strong this cyclone gets. Now if it goes further south, it's going to be drawn into this cold front here that's going to impact New Zealand, but if it heads further north, then it's going to have more opportunity to really access the fuel and the primed conditions in the Coral Sea, which means it will be stronger and it's more likely to head for this Queensland landfall. And that's the scenario that I'm backing right now, but we don't have anything to suggest that the other scenario that I just mentioned won't happen. So again, I can't really be making the best forecast right now, but I am going to try my best, and I am going to say that we're expecting a landfall sometime on Thursday on a location between Townsville and Mackay, which I'll get to in just a minute. But you can see Wednesday the 24th, looking at quite a strong tropical cyclone moving towards the Queensland coastline, pressure in the high 940s, which is a very consistent intensity that has been forecast for this tropical cyclone to peak as, which we're probably looking at a high-end category 4 strength tropical cyclone on the Australian scale at this time. Very similar intensity to what Cyclone Jasper peaked as, and it will probably weaken ever so slightly before it makes landfall just outside of Bowen and just outside of Townsville. So quite a few people will be impacted by the cyclonic wind swathe from this tropical cyclone, probably up to 150,000 people around the center of circulation here, which is a big population to be impacted by a tropical cyclone in Australia. So again, if you do live in this area, make sure you're watching the forecast very closely. I would make sure your cyclone emergency kits are all up to date and all sorted. You've got that working radio, and you've got some supplies starting to come in, so your bottled water and your canned food. Just get ahead of the game, because it's when these warnings start to come out is when people start panic buying and hoarding stuff. So if you can have a 1 or 2 day head start, then that's a really good edge that you have over quite a few people here, because this is going to be a powerful tropical cyclone. Peak wind gusts could be in excess of 225 kilometers an hour, and that can strip roofs off homes. So it's a very good idea to be as prepared as possible very early on. And if you also live in a flood prone area, area, make sure that you're starting to prepare your sandbags and so forth, especially if you live along the flooded areas or flooding areas between Cardwell and Proserpine, that sort of area. That's where we're expecting the flooding to occur from this tropical cyclone. So if you do live through there, make sure you're just watching the forecast closely and thinking about preparing your sandbags, because it's not till a couple of days until this cyclone will actually impact the Queensland coastline, but it is best to get a 1 or 2 day head start ahead of the game to make sure that you are really prepared. And it's best to be prepared and the cyclone just not come over your area at all, than to be completely unprepared and having a cyclone impact you directly head on. And for the Australian viewers out there, make sure that you've got a good supply of beer as well, and a working generator to keep the fridge working, because you might need it. This might be a 1 or 2 day event where you're stuck without power or access to the bottle-o for a couple of days. So make sure that you've got the drinks ready and on ice. But yeah, we'll keep playing this forecast through. You can see making that direct landfall and then moving inland as a pretty powerful tropical cyclone. Actually, it looks like Charters Towers might still receive a Category 2 strength tropical cyclone impact. It will be relatively fast moving, I guess, so we're probably looking at not too much of a rainfall situation emerging out of this tropical cyclone. At worst, I foresee 600 to 700 millimeters, which I guess is a lot of rainfall, but for this part of the world, that's really a drop in the ocean in places that receive up to 3,000 millimeters of rain a year. But still, expect moderate to major flooding in 1 or 2 rivers. That's definitely possible, and dams will definitely be filling up from this tropical cyclone. It is a cyclone at the end of the day, so it will be a significant impact onto the Queensland coast, and it will be a powerful weather system. You can see it remains a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone as it re-emerges off the coast of Hervey Bay, moving out to sea again as a Category 2, maybe even a Category 3 strength tropical cyclone at this point because of its forward motion, and it will deliver cyclone conditions to areas around Coffs Harbour up towards Byron Bay, the Gold Coast, and even up along the Sunshine Coast, including Brisbane, up towards maybe Noosa or so, and then those winds should start to ease off the further north you get. But you can see, certainly you could expect some very significant wave heights from this tropical cyclone just offshore from Brisbane, as it looks like it turns extra tropical, and maybe a bit of rainfall as well, especially on the backside of the system. You could be seeing quite a few showers, or maybe not actually back up against the Gold Coast and so forth. You'd be expecting quite a lot of rainfall from those showers. In fact, in 1 or 2 locations, maybe up to what I would expect, maybe 200 to 300 millimeters, or in 1 or 2 spots up to 400 millimeters of rainfall. So quite a lot of rainfall is possible, but the bulk of the rainfall, as I said, will happen around the landfall site, where some locations just inland around Charters Towers will pick up to 400 to 500 millimeters. And what's that, just outside of Torrens Creek, maybe around Jerisha, I believe that's how you say it. Maybe 400 millimeters there, so quite a lot of rainfall around there, and they're in places that have already received a significant amount of rainfall from thunderstorms, so we'll be watching out for flooding there. Now, on the inflow bands of this cyclone, the rain showers moving into the storm centre of circulation, you can also see a lot of rainfall expected outside of Mackay, maybe 400 to 500 millimeters in some locations, and this will be in very quick bursts of rainfall, so be expecting some flooding down here. Anywhere north of Rockhampton can be expecting a substantial amount of rainfall along the coastline, and inland communities, depending on where the tropical cyclone's remnants head over the Queensland coastline, that's where you could also be seeing some pretty significant rainfall totals as well. So yeah, a lot of variables in this forecast, and once again, a lot can change in this forecast, but this is how it stands right now, and just be expecting a substantial amount of rainfall from locations south of Cardwell towards the Queensland-New South Wales border. Now, we'll take a look at the ECMWF model real briefly before I give you the most worrying forecast of all, which is the GFS. Normally the low baller of all the models, but it is now definitely the big player in the sense that it does actually expect a Category 5 strength landfall on the Australian coastline, which would be historic, the strongest since Cyclone Yasi of 2011, rather. Now, you can see the ECMWF actually calling for just a weak Category 1 tropical cyclone making landfall north of Townsville. I like this scenario a lot, but again, it's a couple of days earlier than what the Access G3 models suggested, and it's a lot further north as well compared to all the other forecast models. So I like this scenario in the sense that if it did happen, it will be the best case scenario, but I also don't favour it considering that all the models have been trending pretty much towards Townsville and Bowen as the landfall site. And I know this isn't too far out, but it is quite a big difference from both the Access G3 model and the GFS, which are both major forecast models and generally very accurate. So I'm not 100% backing this situation, but once again, it's a possible situation, and I really do hope it happens because it will mean a weaker cyclone impact for the Australian coastline. Now for the GFS model, you've been waiting for it. A very, very strong cyclone expected to make landfall, peaking with winds, pressure, I believe, in the low 940s at 1.945 millibars. 945 millibars. So that's definitely well and truly a Category 5 strength cyclone on the Australian scale, and you can see here the GFS normally very, very much a low baller model in terms of wind speeds, but when you're expecting peak wind speeds of up to 80 knots from the GFS model, and you add an extra 50 knots because the GFS is always so wrong, you're looking at 130 knot winds blasting ashore on the Queensland coastline. Now, am I expecting this to happen? No, but is it possible? Certainly. The conditions in the Coral Sea are beautiful for tropical cyclones to form, so we could be expecting a very powerful tropical cyclone to materialize as per the GFS forecast model. So that's a concerning scenario indeed. And 130 knot winds is 270, 280 kilometers an hour. You're probably looking at, oh no, it's not that high, it's probably about 250 kilometers an hour. So you're looking at a cyclone with comparable strength to Cyclone Yasi, or what was the other one? I can't actually remember its name, but it absolutely blasted Queensland's top end. I think it was 2006. I really can't remember its name, but I was told in the comments yesterday. Cyclone Larry, that's the one. It will be a quick impact, a very quick blowing, very fast through impact. But for a couple of hours, maybe 8 or so hours, you're just going to get blasted by huge cyclone winds, Category 4, Category 5, and tremendous torrential rainfall in some locations. And it's not going to be until you get substantially further inland around Charters Towers that this cyclone becomes Category 2 or Category 1 and is sort of non-severe and non-life-threatening. And the GFS model has a very similar situation. The Access G3 model reemerges out to sea over water and maybe does a little bit of strengthening, but it really doesn't look like it does much, and it sort of just stalls over the Coral Sea. Now, I'm not thinking that the GFS has got this because it stalls. I reckon the GFS is a stalling pattern out to sea over the Coral Sea because of the amount of uncertainty surrounding the system's forecast. I believe that that's just how the GFS operates. But yeah, I'm not expecting a round 2. That would be a very, very extreme case in the Australian basin. Normally in the Australian basin, when tropical cyclones form, they have a very specific destination in mind, and they get there very quick, and then they die off pretty quickly as well. You don't normally see long-lasting or looping tropical cyclones in the Australian basin, which is good because looping tropical cyclones are scary and they're very unpredictable. So yeah, that's a very good thing. Now, the GFS is expecting peak rainfall totals to be around 200 to 300 millimeters inland. And as I said, because it's going to be a fast-moving tropical cyclone, we're not expecting torrential rainfall from this, where we're looking at up to a meter of rainfall. But again, certainly around the mountains outside of Townsville or the hills outside of Townsville, around Charters Towers and into Ravenswood, you could be seeing some locations pick up to 400 to 500 millimeters, and maybe even 1 or 2 spots to 700 millimeters. And the rivers through here will definitely fill, the dams will definitely fill, and I would not be surprised if we see some moderate or major flood alerts be issued as a result of this tropical cyclone and tropical low and its remnant low moving through central Queensland. So make sure that you're ready for that, and make sure you're preparing for possible flooding along a lot of parts of the Queensland coastline, basically anywhere south of Cairns, actually. Now, I did also read a comment yesterday about how people aren't sure because tropical cyclone Jasper was expected to make landfall on Mackay or Rockhampton at some point, and then it swung north and impacted Cairns. For this cyclone to swing north and impact Cairns, it would have to break quite a lot of rules of what we understand about tropical cyclones and how they are moved through steering currents, which are basically atmospheric winds that push clouds around. Think of them like that. That's a big oversimplification. I don't even understand them. So, probably not the best source of information regarding steering currents, this channel, but I'm doing my best. Anyway, the tropical cyclone is very unlikely to move north and impact Cairns as a tropical cyclone. Cairns could definitely be seeing some rainfall. They should be expecting some rainfall and maybe even 1 or 2 strong wind gusts from the associated shower bands from this tropical cyclone, but definitely don't be expecting a Category 2 or Category 3 strength tropical cyclone impact. That right now looks reserved for Townsville or Bowen. And if I was to pick a specific landfall location, I would be picking anywhere between Townsville and Bowen right now for the landfall, probably around a place like Ayr, a small town around Ayr. That's where I'm expecting the landfall from this tropical cyclone, but again, we've really honed it in from yesterday. Expect a landfall between Mackay and Cardwell. That's where this tropical cyclone is most likely to make its landfall, which is a much smaller scope of possibility than yesterday. It's still about a 300 kilometer stretch of coastline, so it's still a very long stretch of coastline, but that's where I'm expecting the landfall to occur at this time, and that's where it's most likely to happen. So if you do live between there, make sure you're watching the forecast very closely, staying up to date with the Bureau of Meteorology, and also staying up to date with this channel so you can get access to the latest forecasts every single day. And I'll be uploading twice daily when this cyclone really gets threatening, and you can also expect some live coverage coverage as well. We might be going live for an hour or two covering this tropical cyclone and seeing what actually happens with the forecast, because there are a lot of factors and it's really hard to cram them all into a 20-minute video. So I am doing my best, and any bit of feedback or suggestions are greatly appreciated. So I thank you so much for those in advance. But yeah, headlining it, a strong tropical cyclone heading for Queensland. A landfall expected between Cardwell and Bowen at this point, most likely between Townsville and Bowen, or Cardwell and Mackay actually, but between Townsville and Bowen around areas we're expecting the landfall. It could peak as a Category 5 strength tropical cyclone. Cyclone warnings and watches aren't out yet, but they will probably be out in around 24 to 48 hours, depending on when this cyclone gets its name. And the next name on the Australian naming list is Kirrily, so make sure you're listening out for Tropical Cyclone Kirrily if you do live along the Queensland coastline. But anyway, that is all from me. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't. We're getting closer on 15,000 subscribers. It's been great having your company, and I will catch you all in the next storm.
Thank you for watching our content this update. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to get more updates covering all things weather and geophysics impacting Australia and the Oceania region. Subscribe to our other channels for more content from across the network, and be sure to check out our website where you can find free access to floater and radar imagery and articles on everything weather and much more. If you wish to support us directly, you can purchase some of our merchandise. We have a wide variety of clothing and homeware, or you could become an Ultimate Fan, which is the best way to directly support us, granting you some sweet perks and offers, including features in our custom storm animations, live streams, and much more.